tribe, and my stories will thrive. Welcome to another video by the Blue Tongues of Hell for some more Hildar Chronicles. This 17th chapter is called Under the Hoof. It was noon. A moderately high sun invited yellow and black striped dragonflies to survey the grassy streets of Vanaheim, where kids were playing with frogs and sticks. A mother called her dirty kids back to the warren and plunked onto the table a large clay pot of Granelger stuffed sheep's bladder, beetroot, and mushrooms. The scent sleepily crept out of a window and made a ragged elk-hound's tummy rumble as it pissed against the wooden pail of apples. Further west, on the outskirts of Helheim's sleepy square, a family of 3 tucked into a meal of smoked plaice and roasted turnips, doused in a bitter sauce of vinegar and fermented goat's milk. Most villagers were either washing their grub down with a horn of ale or snoozing to the sough of coastal waves. The heat was bearable, but quite unusual for the islanders, and taking an afternoon digestive nap had become a daily treat since the king had decided to travel west with King Harald. The hedonistic calm was exchanged for irritation when an unnecessary amount of noise emanated from the southern homes. Somebody must have left the gates open again and let in a few undead horses or pigs. The commotion didn't go away, and the rising smoke and cries of terror indicated perhaps a small detached herd of the undead swarming in the plains. The burning homes and alarmed villagers running in disarray down the streets suggested otherwise. Helheim was under attack. The element of surprise and swift destruction of a southern gate had allowed Gunnar's army to take the paralyzed population by storm. The Vanaheimers executed men, women, and children indiscriminately. Soldiers on horseback swung their axes and tore through terrified crowds, while foot soldiers looted, raped, and slaughtered with unhinged passion. Until King Gunnar had found what he was looking for, his army was going to have a field day with Helheim's yielding citizens. The massacre ceased when Gunnar had his hornblowers blasted in a victory. He paraded out of Mooncastle wearing chain metal garments stained in charcoal and an imposing stag-horned helmet. He remembered to duck before going outside through the main door, unlike his grand entrance that had sent his helmet crashing to the marble floor when his antlers struck the arched beams. Gunnar held a pike in his right hand and showed whose head was resting on the pointed end. Bjorn, brother of the king's sister, Estrid. A berserker tugged on a chain to pull Estrid's neck, who dragged her feet to join Gunnar in the square. Her right cheek had been mutilated and dripped blood onto her white dress. Gunnar admired his handiwork and stroked his own gnarled cheeks.
I love your new face's symmetry, Lady Estrid. The wolf scars were jarring on your left cheek and needed a visionary touch to match your statuesque beauty.
She frowned at the crippled man, who laughed out loud.
The war is won. Helheim is now under the hoof of Granelgar. Obey your new masters, and you shall live. Not happily, I cannot lie, but perhaps you will do when the seas have turned white as your smelly walls, and we have graciously fed you your favorite stuffed bladder and beetroot.
Gunnar gave his personal bodyguards a harsh stare, and they clashed their shields to order a laugh or two and a spontaneous round of applause. In the disorientating gloom of Nibelungen's caves, Astrid and Kara stumbled across Harald, who was as lost as they were. The king was devastated. His men and King Jarl's had been killed by a horde of drogs who had climbed over the stone enclosure and punctured their hearts while they slept. Harald had escaped through the invisible door when the monoliths keeping them prisoners had sunk back into the ground. Kara could not smell the odor of any drog on his body, only human blood, and something else she couldn't quite figure out. It was similar to the faint scent floating out of the dead girl where the green table had been. Astrid saw Kara's dubious frown and changed the subject by sniffing the air. There really was something unpleasant about it. A strong, sulphury smell was flooding the tunnels, and Kara urged them in an opposite direction. Earthy fresh air and the scent of pine trees drew them out of the mountainside and into a moonlit wood that was being pummeled by heavy rain and lightning. They hurried through the oily black undergrowth and took shelter under an oak tree.
They stink of town,
said a voice above them.
Worse,
said another.
but I couldn't give a twinkle. The blonde carcass is mine.
You can have a leg when I've puked it out, said a third drog, observing from a higher branch the three humans as they huddled together. Despite the rain, Kara sniffed the danger and advised her new companions to stay calm. Astrid looked upwards and saw a hunk puckery eyes, staring back down at her. She screamed and ran. Harald saw one of the Drogs climbing down and ran after Astrid. Kara didn't know why, but she flew after the humans. She used to hate them so dearly, especially after meeting Gunnar. And now, one of these foul creatures had saved her from a demon who claimed to work for a god. A god the Order was meant to be devoted to. Flashes of pale blue spider webs stained the soaked pine trees with every bolt of lightning. Astrid cut her cheeks and arms as she fled through the woods, tearing through bracken and struggling out of brambles. Branches creaked and snapped overhead, and the scampering paws of rabid Drogs could be heard all around her. Before she could say hogspiss, her head hit a bed of pine needles, and the patter of rain instantly ceased. Harald had lost track of Astrid and groped around in the dark, swinging his blade frantically. Far was the cunning young man who thought he had everyone under his thumb. His left hand shook as he checked to see if his fiery belt was still around his waist, and instead of touching the Nibelungen relic, his forehead bumped into a tree trunk. The tree was in fact an enormous Drog who twisted Harald's wrist until the sword dropped into the mud. The Drog held him up by one arm and seemed about to plunge 3 claws into his bedraggled body. A female Drog dashed in front of Harald's headsman and placed the back of her hand against the executioner's forearm. "Wait, it's me, Kara of Nebelwood, sister of Skuld." The Drog holding Harald growled with frustration and kneed Kara out of the way. She didn't submit and slashed the giant's thigh. "Kara," I said, "I was taken hostage and tortured by the janitor. This is one of the pathetic souls who saved me." A sea of Drogs swarmed around them and masked the pine tree silhouettes in a veil of darkness that imprisoned Kara and Harald in a tight net. Don't know if you've heard, but Nebelwood means nothing to us. Since you and Trevor left, we've been doing things differently. The Drog sniggered and stuck a long claw into Harald's mouth, playing with his tongue. "A word, perhaps, little man?" Harald choked and was about to offer his hospitality and whatever they wanted to eat in Muspelheim when another Drog bounced overhead from bough to bough and landed effortlessly before Kara.
Yngvi, still as impetuous as ever.
"Rever? You're meant to be dead," replied Yngvi with little rejoicing.
The pale fox speaks the truth. I was ambushed years back with my most loyal dogs by the sadistic sleeper who rules over these mountains, and somehow I owe this human my life.
What about this one? Said another Drog, carrying Astrid under his arm as he made his way through the pack. I would be the sadist's pet if it weren't for her, said Kara.
These individuals would be appetizers under normal circumstances. Tonight, they indirectly smashed my shackles and let me breathe the flint and pinewood air again.
Where are the others? Asked Yngvi, feigning interest in the other half of the pack that had gone missing years ago.
The others were all expunged by the snake-haired man named Ikto Ixin, and by the dragon. These humans and I are the only ones to have escaped alive.
Thunder gradually crumbled further away, and the rain showered over Hell's gorges. Yngvi dropped Harald to the floor and prowled around Refr, the woodland king of old. Good to have you back, Refr. We could use a boy like you in the pack.
Your pack, you mean? I see.
No hard feelings, son of Ordor, said Yngvi. She didn't believe the king would give in so easily to her authority, and stepped anti-clockwise around an imaginary circle that shrunk and expanded in rhythm with the pack surrounding them. A faint clap of thunder was heard far away, and the Refr sprang forwards. Yngvi brought a heavy elbow crashing down on Refr's back as he tried to slide through her legs. The blow was almost fatal and bruised his spine badly, but Yngvi's ankles were slit open to the bone. She collapsed backwards, and the Refr fought away his exhaustion and pain and tore through the giant's torso up to her lips. Yngvi slithered back to her grass snake form and died. The pack of Drogs who were waiting to finish off the defeated rival lost their growl. They fell in silence to their knees and vowed their devotion to the new leader. Asmund and Hedil crashed the party and arrived with unfortunate news. The dragon was not dead, and they needed to leave immediately. Astrid woke up to the unsettling word, dragon. Refr concurred.
My leash may be gone, but so is the dragon's. It will find us soon enough. Where do you expect us to go, King Refr? Home to the rotting caves of Nebelwood, so the mist can drain us again.
Growled the Drog, fiddling with Astrid's long blonde locks, which made her hackles rise. Unlike before when running for her life, Astrid remembered she was wearing the gripper. She clutched the bear's blade with rising excitement in anticipation for sudden battle.
I don't know yet,
Reffer admitted.
but we can't stay here.
The Nidhogger will find us wherever we go, whined another Drog, sniffing Harald's backbone. At least the humans and their dead aren't here. Edil walked through the crowd of Drogs as a man. He tapped Astrid's shoulder and winked to Harald while wondering where the rest of the troop was. The sky was a web of thorny black branches, and the moon bathed Edil's face in shards of light. He growled and snapped into his Drogar shape. Harald nearly bit his tongue, and Astrid swore with gastric poetry.
I know where we can go, where we can be safe. The two-headed white dragon is strong enough to defeat an old dragon lady, and I invite you all to stay there, if you wish, in Helheim.
Asked Reffer.
If we can get along,
Replied Edil.
I have learned to live with myself. I'm certain you can bury your justified fury and give it a shot.
Most Drogs shook their heads and crumbled in a choir of low growling.
Your heart is in the right place, Prince Edil. It might take more than words, though, to seal the deal. We will consider your offer,
said Reffer, which displeased the majority of the Drogs. A scream of devastation sent a shock down everyone's spine. Asmund! Kyoku staggered out of the dark woods into his arms. She fell to the soggy floor and held his hand. My poor Asmund, what have they done to you? Edil was overjoyed to see her, while also feeling troubled by the way she stared at him from beside Asmund's colossal body.
The Drogs are not to blame. It was the dragon,
said Asmund, stroking Kyoko's slightly scorched hair.
Are you all right, Kyoko? Where are Freyr and Hilda?
Asked Edil, clutching the black obsidian bag. Kyoku did not know where Hilda was, or why Edil knew who she had come with. However, she was dead certain about how fast they had to run before the mountain erupted and the revengeful Firebird came for their sorry spirits. Reffer's heart pounded at the sight of his surrogate mother.
You speak the truth, don't you?
He paused a while and dug his claws into the dead bloody snake. He flung it to the snarling Drogs and decided to let the humans go.
Take care, my dear. Get away from here, as far as you can go.
She understood he didn't mean just the Nibelungen Mountains. When some of the rogue drogs were about to go astray to hunt the humans later, a burst of sunrise lit the woods from the west. Everyone knew that was not possible, and they suddenly saw fireballs soaring into the dark skies, followed by a blast from beneath their feet.
We have to leave now, Hedil,
said Harald.
What about my father and our men? We can't leave them behind,
replied the prince.
They perished,
replied Harald, whispering into Hedil's ear.
Killed by dogs. Let's get out of here.
Kara didn't miss the serpent's words and warned Astrid of Harald's insincerity. The drogs and the handful of men parted ways. The mountains shook and spat fountains of fire into the night. See you next time for chapter 18 of The Hilda.